Hello, so today we're going to do Unit 1, Day 2 notes, which is solving linear equations. Now, we're basically going to talk about what an equation is. An equation is a mathematical statement, also known as an expression, with an equal sign. So now let me give you two examples of an equation. So this is an equation. 3x minus 2 equals 4. It has the equal sign. An example of something that's not an equation, basically an expression, is 3x minus 2. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the next section, which is one-step equations. Remember, one-step equations, all you have to do is move the constant. So here we're doing plus 3, so I need to move it to the other side, and it becomes a minus 3. Because the opposite of a plus 3 is a minus 3. So I'm left with x equals negative 8. Because negative 5 minus 3 is negative 8. Example 2. I need to move the constant, which is the number without the letter, and that will be the 8. So the opposite of a plus 8 or a positive 8 is a minus 8. So now I have x equals 1 because 9 minus 8 is 1. Example 3. I need to jailbreak or move the minus 3 over to the other side. So I'm literally picking it up and moving it to the other side. So that becomes a plus 3. So x equals negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. And example 4 will be the opposite of a minus 8 is a plus 8. So x equals 9 plus 8 is 17. Now these are one-step equations. If you want, go ahead and do examples 1 and 2, which are very similar to the ones we just did. If you have any questions on those two examples, please do not hesitate to ask me in class the next day. Now I'm going to quickly do the next 4 examples, which involves multiplying and dividing. Now if you notice, the opposite of multiplying by negative 5 is to divide by negative 5. Now remember, if between the letter and the number, if there's a plus, you know that's addition. If there's a minus in between the two numbers, or the letter and the number, that's subtraction. Now, if there's no symbol between the 5 and the x, or the number and the letter, that means it's multiplication. This is implied to be multiplying. This is implied to be negative 5 times x. And now because I want to move the negative 5 to the other side, the opposite of multiplying a negative 5 is to divide a negative 5. So when I do that, these negative 5s go away, and I'm left with x equals 5 divided by negative 5 is a negative 1. Okay? So remember, you always want to do the opposite of the operation when you're moving these numbers over. Okay? So now, we have the negative x. If there's no number in front of the variable, it's implied to be a 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 there, and that becomes a negative 1x equals a negative 9. Now, because there's no symbol between this negative 1 and the x, it's implied to be multiplying. So that means I'm doing negative 1 times x. So the opposite of multiplying by negative 1 is to divide by negative 1. So x equals 9, because negative 9 divided by negative 1 is a positive 9. Now, if you notice, this fraction symbol means division. So if there's a fraction symbol between the letter and the number, that means division. So of course, if I'm dividing, the opposite of dividing is to multiply. So the opposite of dividing -2 is to multiply -2. So these -2's go away, and I'm left with 0.5 times -2, which is just -1, equals x. Now, same thing here. Now, to be able to get rid of this fraction, you have two options. You can either change the 1/2 into a decimal, which will be 0.5, x equals 3, or you can get rid of this fraction by doing the opposite of dividing by 3, which will be multiplying, or getting rid of this fraction by dividing by 2, which will be the opposite, which will be multiplying in this case. Now, let's start by doing the first way and converting this 1/2 into a decimal. So 1/2 as a decimal is 0.5x equals 3. Now the 1/2 became 0.5. Now if you notice, I'm multiplying. So the opposite of multiplying by 0.5 is to divide by 0.5. So these 0.5's go away, and I'm left with x equals 3 divided by 0.5 gives me 6. Now, if you want to do it the other way, to get rid of this fraction, that means the original operation is dividing by 2. So the opposite of dividing by 2 is to multiply by 2. So these 2's go away, and I'm left with 1x equals 3 times 2 is 6. Now, of course, this 1 I could divide by 1, but really, there's no need for that because I can just make that 1 go away, and I get x equals 6. So there's two different ways of solving that problem, and basically just choose the best one you prefer. Okay. Now let's move on to step 2, or to the second section, which is two-step equations. Now I'm only going to do 2 problems under this section, and the first one I would like to do will be example 1. Now, first thing I need to do when I'm solving these problems is step 1, move the constant. Step 2, move the coefficient. So now, of course, you should know that the constant is the number without the letter. And so in example 1, that's -8. So jailbreak the -8 to become +8. So I'm left with 4x equals 16 plus 8 is 24. Now, step 2 is to move the coefficient. The coefficient is the number right beside the letter, or near the letter. So the opposite of multiplying by 4 is to divide by 4. So x equals 6, because 24 divided by 4 is 6. Now, I would like to also do example 4. Now, first step is to move the constant. So that will be the +4. So the opposite of +4 is -4. So I'm left with 2/3 h equals 10 minus 4, which is 6. Now, of course, you have two options. You can either change the 2/3 into a decimal, or you can leave it as a fraction and get rid of the fraction. Now, I only recommend that you change fractions into decimals when you get a very nice decimal. And what I mean by that is a finite decimal that doesn't go on forever. So an example, a half can be converted into 0.5. That's a nice decimal. Or a fourth, which is 0.25. That's also nice. Or even 3/4, which is 0.75. Or 5/2, which is 2.5. Those are nice decimals that you can deal with. But when a fraction becomes a really bad decimal, so for example, 2/3 becomes 0.6666666, and it goes on and on and on forever. That's kind of messy, so I would just prefer to leave this as a fraction and just take care of it by parts. So first thing I want to do is get rid of this fraction. So of course that means the fraction is dividing by 3. Because there's your fraction and your division, so that means divided by 3. So the opposite of dividing by 3 is to multiply by 3. So I'm left with 2h equals 6 times 3 is 18. Now, I have 2h, so the opposite thing to do is to divide by 2. Because if we're multiplying by 2, the opposite is to divide by 2. So we're going to divide, and these 2's cancel out. So I'm left with h equals 18 divided by 2, which is 9. So that is my answer. Once again, go ahead and work these problems out. If you have any questions about them, please do not hesitate to ask me in class the next day. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and move on to the second page. Now, under the next section, we are going to be combining like terms and equations so we can be able to solve these equations. So let's add another step to this section. So step 1 is going to be combine your like terms. Step 2, move the constant. Step 3, move the coefficient. So there's my 3 steps. Now, let's start with step or example 1. Now, when you're combining like terms, always try to divide your 2 sides separately. So, of course, I'm going to write down my equal sign, and I'll start with the left side so I can combine like terms. Okay, so looking at the left side, can I combine anything? Yeah, I can. I can do 6x plus x minus 3x. So 6x plus 1x is 7x minus 3x is 4x. And then bring down your minus 12 equals 36. Now, as you can tell, I couldn't do anything with the right side, so I'm just going to leave it like it is. So I took care of step 1, combining like terms. Now, step 2, move the constant. That is the number without the letter. So the opposite of a minus 12 is a plus 12. So 4x equals 36 plus 12 is 38, 48. Now, the opposite of multiplying by 4 is to divide by 4, and that should take care of our third step, which is move the coefficient. So x equals 12, because 48 divided by 4 is 12. Now, let's go ahead and do example 2. Now, step 1 is to combine like terms. So, of course, the right side doesn't have anything, so I'm just going to write 24. Now, the left side, we have a couple things we can combine. 4x minus 3x plus 7x. 4x minus 3x is 1x, plus 7x is 8x, and then bring down your minus 16. Now, of course, you would like to jailbreak the constant, which is the plus 16. So 8x equals 24 plus 16. So 24 plus 6 is 30, plus 10 is 40. So the last step is to move the coefficient. So that will be the number in front of the x. So that means the opposite of multiplying by 8 is to divide by 8. So my final answer is x equals 40 divided by 8 is 5. Okay, you will do problem number 1 by yourself. If you would like to know the answer, please ask me tomorrow in class. Now let's move on to our last section, which is solving equations by applying the distributive property. Now, once again, I'm going to add another step to our list. So step 1 is get rid of parentheses. 2, combine your like terms. 3, move the constant. 4, move the coefficient. Okay? So now, there's my 4 steps. I will always follow these for problems like basically any equations problems. This is the order you should follow when solving your equations. It will make these complicated problems a lot easier, okay? And of course, when we move further with our lessons for the next few days, we are going to be adding a couple more steps to this list, which will allow us to solve complicated multi-step equations, okay? So example 1, step 1, get rid of the parentheses. Oh, we do have parentheses, so let's get rid of them by applying the distributive property. 3 times 2x is 6x. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. And then I want to bring down the minus 4x equals 33. Now, step 2, combine your like terms. Of course, on your right side, there's nothing to combine, so I'm going to bring down my 33. Now, if you look at the right side or the left side, we have 6x minus 4x. 6x minus 4x is 2x, and then that leaves me with minus 15. Now, next thing I want to do is move the constant. So the opposite of a minus 15 is a plus 15. So 2x equals 33 plus 15 means 33 plus 5 is 38 plus 10 is 48. Now, the last step is to move the coefficient. So the opposite is to divide by 2. Because the original operation is to multiply by 2, so the opposite of multiplying is to divide. So my final answer is x equals 48 divided by 2 is 24. Now, let's go ahead and do the last example for this section. And I'm going to draw myself a little line so I won't mix my work up. So, for example, for the next example, we have 2 sets of parentheses. And of course, we know that the first step is to get rid of parentheses. So, I'm going to apply the distributive property twice. First time is to distribute the 3. So, 3 times 4x is 12x. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Now, I'm going to do 2 times everything on the second set of parentheses. So 2 times 11 is positive 22. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4x equals 43. Now the next step is to combine your like terms. Of course, you know that on the right side of the equal sign there's nothing to combine, so I just wrote down my 43. But of course, on the left side, there's a couple things we can combine. So let's begin with 12x minus 4x. 12x minus 4x is 8x. Negative 15 plus 22 is positive 7. Now, the next step is to move the constant. Now, of course, if you know what the constant means, it means the number without the letter. And yes, I think I did make a mistake, and I'm glad I caught myself, and you probably caught this as well. So let's take this a step back. So 12x, let's go back to the previous step, which is combining like terms. So of course, we said that 12x minus 4x is 8x. Now, we need to combine our like terms, which is negative 15 plus 22, which is positive 7. Oh, I was correct. My bad. And then, of course, your equals 43. And just, it's always good to double check. So I'm going to go back and make sure that I did multiply just so I can double check to make sure. 3 times 4x is 12x. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. 2 times 11 is 22. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4x. It seems correct. I guess we are going to have a weird answer for this problem. So let's go ahead and do the opposite of a plus 7, which is a minus 7. And that will tell us, that will fulfill the third step, which is move the constant. Now, what is 43 minus 7? That is 36. Bring down your equal sign, and you're left with 8x on the left side. Now, the last step is to move the coefficient. So the opposite of multiplying by 8 is to divide by 8. Now, of course, 36 divided by 8 is a weird, it could be either a decimal or a fraction, but if you do 36 divided by 8 as a decimal, you get 4.5, which doesn't seem too bad of an answer. Okay? So, of course, if you would like to do the closure by yourself, and if you would like to also do problem number 1 over here, and if you have any questions about anything that we went over today, please do not hesitate to ask me in class tomorrow.